Well, welcome to the Dallas Film Podcast. My name is Tony Armour, and very excited to have Katie Pryor with us today. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Katie and I have known each other, I was going to say a long time, but I suppose it depends on your definition of a long time now. But for years, 2020 is when we first met, correct?
Correct. I think it was 2020.
I think it was a New Orleans Film Festival Zoom for a virtual workshop for their festival at that time in 2020.
Yeah, I think we were both panelists when the world shut down, when everybody was meeting via Zoom.
Yeah.
It's friendships can be made on Zoom.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We met on Zoom, and then when was the first time we saw each other in person?
I think it was Cannes.
I was going to say in France.
Oh, no. It was, I came to the Sunscreen Film Festival, met you there.
You came, so that would have been like April of 2021, because we probably did the Zoom in like November of 2020, something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You had sponsored the panel, so I called you to introduce myself so that we didn't meet the first time on a panel. And they had put me on your panel. I wanted to make sure you were okay with it.
Yeah, that's right. Because at the time when I was St. Pete Clearwater, I'd been sponsoring New Orleans Film Festival for several years, and then and then carried over when I was in Dallas, but not this year, unfortunately, since I'm on the way out the door. So we'll have to see what the next person does here. So for those of you who are listening who may not know, I am leaving as the Dallas Film Commissioner officially at the end of July, beginning of August. Like August 1st is actually my last day. But by the time you listen to this episode, this is going to be sometime in late August when this comes out. So I'll have been gone a few weeks at that point. Not gone, but just gone from the film office. So additionally, this very well may be my last episode hosting the Dallas Film Podcast, unless I'm brought back at a later date, since I won't be an employee of the Film Commission anymore. So it's a sad day, but not to worry. I'm going to restart up the Sunscreen Film Festival podcast, and then start doing that from scratch, basically. Or we probably did 45 episodes years ago, and so it'll really be like a reboot kind of thing. But still going to use the wonderful MZ Studios here in Dallas to do our podcast. I just won't be live in studio. It'll be all sort of via Zoom. So anyways, a little housekeeping business there. Katie, why don't you tell us about yourself? Who are you? Why are you on this? Why am I talking to you today?
I gotta, what podcast is this? Is this who am I? What a question. In relative to what we'll be discussing.
Yes.
Going super deep into our meaning of life. By day, I'm the Baton Rouge Film Commissioner in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, capital of Louisiana. And I am also a adjunct professor at LSU in film and television about economic drivers and representation in film, in front and behind the camera, and politics in Hollywood post-World War II. And I am the founding board president of a film trade high school here. And I am also proudly, with you, the co-founder of our nonprofit, FilmUSA. So everything I do circles around the power of storytelling to influence society and lives. And those are the venues that I do it through.
So film commissioners, we've talked on this podcast probably a little bit, and people kind of, I think by this point in time, have a basic knowledge of what film commissioners are and what they do. Or maybe not. Maybe someone's listening to this for the first time. So Katie, why don't you tell us what we do, what I do for another 3 or 4 days, and what you will still be doing?
Yeah, so film commissioners are basically economic developers specializing in film and television. So our job is to grow the creative economy in our relative markets. So the way that looks is different for every film office, but generally speaking, we're the ones that are marketing and advertising to attract the industry to come and film in our area. And then we work to support the industry that's here. And that can look a number of ways. Some do education training programs, podcasts, community outreach, things like that. And then most of us do permitting and help assimilate the film once it gets here. So when you want to go film in an area, really your first call should be the Film Commission. Because as a filmmaker, you would want to think of it as a city paid producer on your team. Our job is to make production happen, and we can facilitate that when you need to close a road, get a permit, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always like to say that our job is to say yes, and we might have questions for you and things that we're going to ask you that will help us say yes, but that's what we want to do. We're not here to put roadblocks up and to prevent you from doing your project? Because many people view the Film Commission as, it's something that gets in the way of making their project as opposed to helping them. So that's
I feel like newer filmmakers see it that way. And then once the first time a filmmaker uses a film office, an official film office, and they go, oh, wait, so it's so much easier. Because they'll call, for example, someone will call, we have a beautiful park here, and they'll say, hey, can we use that park? Well, that park is tied to a property that charges you $3,000 a day, and you can't get around that. But there's a park that looks exactly like it on the other side of town that's $300 a day. So I'll be like, well, why don't you just go, you just make it so much easier. So I think when you deal, especially with larger studios or larger productions, they know to call Film Commission first. So anybody who's listening, who's getting into it, first time filmmaker or kind of on the newer side, definitely utilize your film offices.
Yeah. And you've been Film Commissioner in Baton Rouge 8 years now?
Correct.
8 years.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us how you got started? I think it's an interesting tale.
Oh, golly, how did I get started? So film commissioning is kind of an interesting mix because it's film, but it's in the politics side of things. Like we're under the mayor's office and the tourism bureaus usually. And I had a background in film and television. I actually got started working in sports stunts coordinating, which is wild because I know nothing about sports or stunts. So I had to learn that. My first film was a basketball movie. I remember they called and asked, and I was like, yeah. And I hung up the phone. I looked at my brother and I was like, basketball's the orange ball, right? Like I just was like completely didn't know, but it worked. I got good at it and outsourced what I didn't anyway. So I worked in film, and that led me into a career in film and television on set for a while. And then we were doing a rugby movie in Baton Rouge, and this is juicy for a podcast, but probably not what I should be telling. But
no, talk away.
I came to work a rugby movie in Baton Rouge. I will not tell you who it was starring, but it was definitely not someone you would think would be in a rugby movie. And all the producers, except for one, went to jail. They turned out to not be great people. And so the one that didn't go to jail was a businessman who had just gotten into film. And he was like, you know what? I don't really love the film thing. Why don't you stay on with me? And I stayed on with him and did a number of projects, special projects. And I kind of call that like my MBA phase. And had a great time and got really involved in politics locally. And from that, got recruited into political consulting, worked consulting for years, worked the current mayor's campaign. So when she was elected and the film office was open, she knew I had a background in politics and film. So she was like, hey, I'll put you there. And it worked out. So that was 8 years ago.
And is she still the mayor?
She's still the mayor. We have an election in November for her final term.
Okay, I was going to say, how many terms can someone be mayor in Louisiana?
In Baton Rouge 3 times.
In Baton Rouge. Yeah. I guess it is. It can be different, but city by city and whatever else around the country. I don't even pretend to be able to keep track of that. So. Yeah.
No, we will not talk about elections on your podcast to save you.
But yeah,
got a lot of elections coming up.
Let's not do that. Okay, so political consultant, into Film Commission. What was that like when you first started? Because we're going through the process now in Dallas of looking for the next film commissioner. And there are a lot of people who have applied for the job who are, just shouldn't have applied for the job kind of thing. That's what I'll say. That's a safe way. That's a safe way of saying that.
I think it's really important. I do think there are transferable skill sets that fit, to develop a really great film commissioner. I do think there is a huge advantage to taking someone who's already familiar with this world and has the experience as a film commissioner and has kind of dealt with all the different entities, because you're kind of the liaison between the creative community, the production community, the government community, which are all very different pieces. And it's sometimes really hard to figure out how those all work together. For me, walking in, it was my first time as a film commissioner, but I had a background in film production and a background in politics and had been working in those circles. So it was easy for me to kind of assimilate. I think the biggest thing, especially when somebody's taking over an office, is the handoff. My handoff wasn't as smooth because there was a hiccup in the transition time. So I didn't have access to any previous files. I didn't have
I'm laughing because I know the real story when you say hiccup in the transition time.
Yeah. So politically said, there was a hiccup in some time in the transition. So when I came in, I had nothing. And so I was, thank goodness, had a history in like economic reporting and record keeping and, all that kind of stuff. So I really had to start from scratch on a lot of that stuff. And and then I think it's really important with your team. I was able to bring on a number two at the time who has since moved on to produce. And now I have a number two that has really become my number two in life. And I would never let him leave.
He's tied up in the corner right now. We just can't see him.
Yes, he's right behind me. He's stuck here forever. But I tell him, I'm like, if I ever leave this job, you're coming with me. Like, and I'm a package deal. If I ever did interview with anybody else, I'd be like, hey, just so you know, there are two of us. But yeah, I think your team's really important, and the transition and the handover, as much as you can help the next person understand the market and meet everybody and, all that kind of stuff. Because luckily for us, I feel, you tell me if it's been the same for you, it's such a social job too, because you get to know all the creatives in your community, which to me is the best part of our job, is all the people.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. So if you're not a social person, it's not a job for you. You have to be able to have conversations with absolute strangers about a wide variety of things. I mean, it's sort of that, like everybody likes to say, the soft skills. You have to have soft skills. It's not just the knowledge of the industry and, being able to do, there's so many things. It's such a weird job, right? It's like, it's business development, it's economic development, it's workforce development, it's advertising and marketing, it's networking, it's politics, it's knowing the film industry and being able to do all that. Like, who can do those jobs? Like, that's a lot of random skills, And
it's doing those jobs when you're underfunded and understaffed.
Yeah.
Because what U.S. Film Commission office is truly well-staffed and well-funded?
Yeah. I like to, I'll give you a sports analogy. I like to say that, being a film commissioner is like being a head coach in the NFL or head coach in college football, because it's a limited number of jobs, right? So, there's only 32 NFL head coaching jobs. So only 32 people in the world can have that job. Now, a few more film commissioners. So let's call it college, right? So there's what, maybe 200 film commissioners in the United States, something like that. And so that's a limited number of jobs. And so who is right for this very limited job? And in a lot of scenarios, sad to say, in a lot of government situations, because they do end up being government jobs, it's just like, hey, this is your job now, learn it. And a person just gets thrown into it and be like, I'm the film person now, and they know nothing about the industry, and that's government for you, right? Just like, you're here, and we now have this office, so now it's your job.
Yeah, I was talking to a film commission that shall remain nameless for the purpose of this conversation about how to guarantee success. And I said, I think it's much better to put the right industry people in a government job and teach them government than it is to put government people in an industry job and try and teach them industry. Because there is a certain part of you to work anywhere in the entire creative economy cycle where you have to be a little off to want to do it. And you are, I am, we all there's a passion play in it, and there's a love for it. And if you don't have that, it just makes everything so much more difficult and uncomfortable. So you kind of have to have that. And that's why I think a lot of people don't understand what it is, and they think it's just permitting. Oh, it'd be easy. I'm just going to put somebody in there. And then that person gets in there and they're not set up for success because they realize what it is. But, with AFCI's efforts and FilmUSA's efforts, I think you're seeing with the community growing of film commissioners, a lot of that exchange of information, because we all operate in a silo because we're the only ones in our market. And there's no comparison. So now that we have these communities and we can share information and best practices and things like that, I think it's changing. I think it's much more helpful.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right on that. And that's super important. That's where I came from. I came from the background of having my own production company, running a film festival, being a producer and a filmmaker and all this other kind of stuff. And then I got dropped into government and had to learn the government. So, okay, well, I can learn the government-ness of it. But if you take that government person and try and cram 15, 20 years of real life working practical experience in the industry into their brain, it doesn't work because, and look, I guess I'm going to slam on government employees right now, because there's a reason that the stereotype of a government employee is somebody who's just a 9-to-5er. And that's it. And then they have no passion to do anything outside, and they'll take their sweet time, getting back to you and just be like, my job is safe. It doesn't affect my life at all if I answer your questions or not. And that's why a lot of beginning filmmakers don't want to reach out to a film commission, because they see the government-ness of it.
I think the timing is, anybody who spent time on set and is working, 16, 18-hour days, quick turnarounds, everything's a rush, everything's immediate. And, you got to change locations, you got a rain out day, whatever it is. If once you've had that fear of your timeline, it's very different from the timeline in government. So you'll find most film commissioners. I mean, I'm not saying call your commissioner at like 7 a.m. or midnight, but we've all had those calls.
Yeah.
And we wake up and we deal with them because we know what it is to need a road closed at 7 a.m. So I get a call at 4 a.m., stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it is what it is. And so you had touched on a little bit of something about, sort of film commissions around the country having a resource. And AFCI, which you mentioned, is Association of Film Commissions International for those that are listening. And it's our International Film Commission Association. And so members from countries all over the world. Jacqueline, who's from New Zealand, who is the head of AFCI right now, is amazing and doing a great job. And then, we've got our little old FilmUSA here, which is really growing into something that's helping filmmakers and film commissions around the country. We have there's a new film commission that just started in Pennsylvania, and we reached out to them and said, "Hey, you're brand new as a film commission. What can we do to help?" And that, I think, is one of the cool things about this, is that it is a resource to really be able to help offices around the country. Why don't you give us the rundown? Tell us what FilmUSA is, why it's important, why should we care?
Okay. FilmUSA is a nonprofit 501c6 member organization of film commissioners across the country. And I think to your point earlier, with AFCI and with FilmUSA, both of it, it's a fraternity, really, of resources. So
chug. Oh, sorry, wrong fraternity.
Wrong fraternity. But I could say community, but it does feel like fraternity. Like AFCI, I'm going to back up a little bit. Like AFCI, some of my best friends have come from AFCI, which are film commissioners all over the world. The Estonian film commissioner is one of my absolute best friends. We met at a conference in Russia in 2019 through this organization. And generally speaking, film commissioners are really cool people. And so it's really amazing to have that network. And also, like, inside the club, this is not for everyone. Don't use your film commission for this. But if you are a film commissioner and you go to a different region, like I went to New Zealand, I called all the film commissioners because I knew them, and they took me around for a day and showed me, because they know their areas better than anything, and they showed me around or whatnot. So we have that international group, which is really cool. And then Tony and I went to Cannes in 21, and best Cannes, I think, because we were so small still. We're coming from, I loved that year. But we went to Cannes, and they have the international villages, which are, if you're familiar with SEC football, anybody, it's like these huge tailgating events with all these lovely tents, and every country representing their own film community and incentives and things like that. And there wasn't an official USA commission style looking after incentives and really promoting that kind of thing. And that's really what cued us the first time. And then we started looking at it, and there are, the EU organization had the EUFCN, the European Union Film Commissioners Association. We have the Asian Film Commissioners, Latin Americans, Canadian, like all these groups that have their own, UK, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were like, wait, we don't have that.
Yeah, so, and here, I think here's a big point. The U.S. has never had that. In the history of cinema, going back however many years it's been now, let's call it 130 years or whatever, whatever the number is, never, ever, ever has the U.S. had a group or an association or whatever you want to call it to help film commissions or to help the entire country. It's always just been individual, businesses or individual film commissions doing their things on their own.
So notably on that, and I think that speaks to a lot of the way the industry grew in the US, but I think so we started this organization, it fills in that blank. And then we notice the problem that we are the only production heavy country in the world that doesn't have a federal film office. We don't treat this like the cultural export it is, like the multi-billion-dollar industry that it is. And every state kind of more or less competes or fights and does its own thing. And they're also doing their own economic studies. There's nothing that's super smooth or cohesive among the country. And no one's looking at this planning for the future like you do every other industry, especially one that was born in the US. I mean, hello, Hollywood. And so that became the third pillar of our nonprofit, was to educate and I don't like the word lobby. So educate and advocate for a federal film office. So we have, and all of our members have been incredible and wonderfully supportive. We have over 75 members across the country, both at the state and regional levels, all film commissions. And we're all working together to push our legislative leaders to recognize the need and the value of doing this correct economic reporting, forecasting for the future, planning for it. And we can get into the whole reason that the country needs that if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But like the power of this industry, both as an economic and a cultural and political driver, and we're just not paying attention. There's nobody manning the gate at our country. When every other production, I mean, you could just look at every other production heavy country in the world that's doing this. Every European country, Canada's killing it. You've got programs popping up all over the world. It used to be this industry was in the U.S., which state, and then incentives started. You're welcome. Louisiana kicked that off, and then
Canada from sort of an international perspective, and then Louisiana. And then Louisiana was the first one in the U.S. Yeah.
And so now it's so global, right? It's just, I mean, who's not filming in Bulgaria right now? So it's wildly global. And so the whole industry has changed. And our point at FilmUSA is we need to be proactive before we're relegated to being 100% reactive in this situation.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because, like you've said, UK right now, like the amount of production has grown so much in the UK, not just England, somewhere around London, but all over and in Ireland, and it's booming, and it's become such a huge business. And if you're in the film commission side, on the film commission world, and you're going to Cannes and Toronto and AFM and these others, you see the trade magazines, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Screen International, they have the ads on them when you're at the shows. It's like Canary Islands, 40% cash rebate, and countries like Saudi Arabia are getting into this. Do we want to lose business to Saudi Arabia? We're losing, like you said, we're losing business to Bulgaria. There's a reason that I just talked to a cinematographer who's a friend of mine on Sunday, and we were chatting about a new project that he's trying to put together. And I asked him when the last time he had a job, and he said December of 2022. We're going on almost 2 years, and that's a result of the strikes, of course. And then when these strikes happen, and then everyone's like, oh well, the writers and the SAG strikes are over. Well, then you're worrying about IATSE and Teamsters, and production hasn't stopped. So what has production done? They're like, well, you know what? If the unions are going to be a pain in the butt in the U.S., we'll just go to another country where we don't have to mess with the unions. And so people are shooting all over the world. Disney is shooting more than 50%, billions of dollars every single year outside the United States. Every major studio is, and we're really losing this industry that's an American. That's an American industry that we're really the ones who started, and it's going elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, these are American dollars. Mm-hmm. Like that's something that people lose in the conversation as well. They're like, okay, well, production's picking up everywhere else. And yes, there are foreign production companies spending a lot of money, but Olsberg did a study in 2020, and that was 5 years ago. So only imagine what the numbers are, but 65% of the global spend in production was US dollars being spent. So roughly 177 billion, that's a B, billion dollars spent on production. 65% of that was originating from the US, but only 40% of that spend was spent in the US. Yeah. So total global production, it's going around the world. So this is American dollars that could be put towards American jobs, et cetera, is going abroad. And I'm all for cultural representation and opportunities around the world and unique storytelling and all of that. And I'm not talking about removing or downplaying any of that. I think we just need to look at the economic impact and also what stories are being told. Not that we have any control over that, but if you're not producing your content and somebody else is telling your story, is that the best thing for you? And I tell when I'm in DC and I'm talking to representatives about this, I'm like, yes, I understand that everyone thinks it's, economists would say it was the petrodollar compliments of Nixon that the reason you can travel the world and speak English. I would argue that the reason you can travel the world and speak English is because of our content that has been on everyone's television.
100%. Yeah. The reason everyone in the world speaks English is because of film and television. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. I mean, You meet any person who's an immigrant to the United States and you ask them, where did you learn to speak English? Depending on how long they lived and wherever the country they came from, they're going to say, I learned it watching Friends and reruns in Germany or whatever it might be. Because when they're watching it with the subtitles and they're hearing American English and they're having to read subtitles, if you do that for enough years, you're going to pick the language up, and that's how people all across the world have learned how to speak English.
Yeah, I talked earlier about my friend who's the Estonian film commissioner. She speaks like perfect English, absolutely perfect, like gets, double meanings and sarcasm and like a total native speaker. So I assumed she had lived in the US for some time, and I had asked her about it. And at the time I met her, she had never been to the US. She learned English as a child from Baywatch.
Yes. That's awesome. What a great story.
Which is amazing too, because she grew up before the fall of Soviet Union. So David Hasselhoff's on the wall and then on her TV.
That's amazing.
I think it's really funny.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, yeah, and then just a perfect example, right? Another reason why, Baywatch is one of the best television shows of all time, right?
I don't know if I would get behind that argument.
I don't know either. But let's make the excuse for it. Let's do a study. Let's have Oldsberg SBI do a study. How many people around the world learned English from watching Baywatch? That's the next study that I want.
Yeah, I would like to know like the top 5 shows, because it would probably be like Baywatch, Friends, Sesame Street, and like what else? What else has been?
I think if you go back far enough, I mean, I'm going to give a shout out for Dallas here. How about Dallas, the original TV series? I go to Germany and people are like, Dallas, hey, who shot JR? This is 40 years later. People want to say who shot JR. Like that's a show that really traveled. And I think if you go back to the time period when there were really 3 American television stations, ABC, CBS, NBC, and that was it. Well, they're the ones that exported those, broadcast network shows overseas. And so, let's say from the 1950s through the early 2000s, that's what people around the world were watching. And so they're learning it from, Miami Vice and Dallas and I don't know, Falcon Crest and Knots Landing, one of those 80s, soap opera-esque, primetime dramas or whatever. Like that's where, and Baywatch, that's, I think, one of the most syndicated shows of all time.
And it's not just the language, right? So if you're consuming content like that, you're consuming culture as well. So your global perception. I mean, I really think one of the reasons the US has always been seen as this massive power was because of our cultural export. We were everywhere. Everyone spoke English. Everyone saw what we were wearing, saw what we were eating, saw what we cared about, and all of that. So the stories you tell is how people see your society. I'm sure people who grew up watching Baywatch probably came to the US for the first time. It's like, why is not everyone in a bikini?
Well, and of course, and it's tourism, right? That's the tourism perspective then. Like, why is Los Angeles and why are the beaches there so popular? Well, you've been seeing those beaches since, the beach blanket bingo Beach Boys days of the 1960s in film and television. And, you're sitting in Estonia somewhere and you see that, you're like, I want to go there someday. Why wouldn't you want to go visit? And that's easily translated to now the huge boom in tourism in New Zealand thanks to Lord of the Rings, and in Ireland because of Game of Thrones, and in I can't remember where in Spain, but if you looked it up, I think it's like somewhere in Spain because of Game of Thrones, or like Dubrovnik, like all these places that you see on film and television that people are like, that's a real place. I want to go there, and it's because you see it. And so now you're talking about billions in tourism dollars because people are seeing it. And guess what? If less stuff shoots in the U.S. and goes elsewhere, you're losing not just, the economics of people having jobs and working in the U.S., you're losing international tourism as well.
Absolutely. And film tourism is the number 1 growing tourism sector in the industry right now. It was, I'll try and get these numbers right, because Credence Research in 2022, it was a $68.1 billion industry. And they predict by 2028, it'll be a $110.8 billion industry. Like that's insane. That's a major growth. I mean, and it's so much more accessible now too, because apps like Set Jutters and Film Trails and like shout out to Oregon. They have an incredible film trail, and you can facilitate it yourself as a solo traveler and go see where things were filmed. Star Wars was changed. I can't remember the name of
Yeah. So yeah,
I want to say Tatooine, and I was like, that's
yeah.
not real.
Well, Tatooine was shot in Tunisia in the original Star Wars, and then in the follow up films. And so yeah, so when Tunisia goes to Cannes, I went to the Tunisian pavilion, which was right across from FilmUSA, and popped in there. And I mean, of course, what do they got? They got Star Wars all over their walls, and they have like the Star Wars toys with the little, Tatooine setup and all that kind of stuff. And like, they come here and you ask them what their incentive is, and they're like, we don't have an incentive. We're just really cheap, and we're, they're like, okay, well, that's a good,
Star Wars,
good selling point. But Star Wars, who doesn't want to go? Like, I would never have thought of going to Tunisia in my entire life, but at some point, I will probably go to Tunisia just to see Luke Skywalker's home as a kid, because why not? I mean, it's Tunisia. How cool would that be?
You could literally, with the Set Jetters app, you can literally take a picture of yourself with the background, and it overlays this film scene. So you can literally put yourself in the scene with Luke Skywalker, which is crazy.
Well, and there's, in California, there is a very cool state park, and Vasquez Rocks. So Vasquez Rocks is where a ton of Westerns were shot through like the 50s, 60s, everything like that. And then the original Star Trek TV series always shot a lot at Vasquez Rocks, and there's this really recognizable rock formation that's like a point sticking out. And there was an episode of The Big Bang Theory where all the nerd guys were going to convention, and so they had to go to Vasquez Rocks to do that. And then I was in California, years ago with a buddy of mine, and I'm like, let's go to Vasquez Rocks. And we go to Vasquez Rocks, and I'm like, that's just like the Star Trek kind of thing. And so, whether it's a Star Trek nerd like myself who wants to go see Vasquez Rocks, or just, you name it, Game of Thrones or anything else, there's a huge reason that people want to travel, is because they see it, on film television.
Oh, I leaned in hard when I went to Ireland and did the whole bus tour, Game of Thrones, played with the wolves, wore the sword, the cape. I mean, I went all in. I was like, this is crazy. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And when I went to New Zealand, this wasn't an official tour, but I did go to Hobbiton.
Of course, you have to.
I mean, yeah. And when I went to New Zealand, and the film commissioner at the time, KJ at the time, it was film commissioner at the time in the South Island, and he took me around to like private property, off the beaten path where things had filmed. In Lord of the Rings, there's a scene where, oh my God.
Legolas?
No, girl, rock star dad, beautiful.
Yes. She was the elf.
Liv Tyler.
Liv
Oh
Tyler,
my God.
yeah.
Yeah, so Liv Tyler's like riding a horse down the water when the bad guys are after her, and the water comes up and gets them. Somebody's going to write hate in the comments from not knowing all this, but anyway, it was a really, really pretty spot, and I thought I was going to die driving down there. It was like straight down, and I was like, "Yep, this is how I die." But we got down there and just had a little picnic and enjoyed the scenery, and it's just so, you don't know you're into that stuff. Like, people know. But people like me, I'm like, whatever, I work in the industry, it'll be cool. But it's so cool when you're in it. And it's
when you're like, this is where this happened. Or the Forrest Gump bench in Savannah. Like, how many people go to Savannah and just want to sit on that bench? If when I go to Savannah, I haven't been yet, but it's, I'm on a list that I'll end up there. Of course, I'm going to go to the Forrest Gump bench and sit there and say, box of chocolates and, ramble on. It's just what people do. I was in the Coliseum in Rome.
I know where this is going.
And me and some buddies were there, and people are standing around, and there's one. Anyways, I'm standing there going, "Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?" And screaming it at the top of my lungs while the rest of the European tourists are looking at me like I'm an idiot, and my buddies are filming me, because you're in the Coliseum. I mean, come on, am I not going to yell lines from Gladiator? What film fan wouldn't do that? It's amazing.
Yeah, and then, sometimes it doesn't even have to be the visually recognizable. Like, we have a studio space here. One of the largest purpose-built stages in Louisiana are in Baton Rouge, and plug for Celtic. And the Twilight, Breaking Dawn 1 and 2 filmed here. And a lot of people don't know that. And even the snow scene, which was, all computer done, but it was all filmed here. And of course, when you build on stage, they built the honeymoon house and all this kind of stuff. It's all gone. Like, it just looks like a warehouse. It's just a blank stage. But there is a group of people that come every single year on their Pattinson tour, and they just want to stand where he stood. And they do. They just come into the stage. in there. So I mean, it works for them. I'm like, yeah.
Anyways, that's a very long way around to saying that film tourism is important, and people should, and it's fun, right? Like we like seeing things that we've seen on screen and, replicating it or just being there, whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's fun. It's good for business, and it's good for representation. We had Disney filmed the National Treasures TV series here, which was written for and based on Baton Rouge. So everything in it is our city, starring as our city, which you can't buy those kind of advertising dollars. I can't. They went to a bunch of different museums and landmarks and whatnot, and I can't. The Visitors Bureau, which we work in partnership with, they can't afford. Nobody can afford to put that many eyeballs on that many highlights. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's part of the reason that film commissions are often a part of tourism offices, because that's your job is to promote your area, and there really is no better way to promote your area. You can run, if you were running digital video commercials or broadcast television or cable or streaming, whatever you want, you could run $100 million worth of commercials with people seeing it. But it's so different from seeing a commercial of, here is a cool place and here's something to do, because it's just very corporate then, right? It's like, it's corporate, it's an ad, it's a commercial, and sometimes you pay attention, sometimes you don't. But if you're watching a show or a film, something that you like and that you're engaged with, and you just see that background, and it hits you more subconsciously than, the blatantness of a commercial, and people just see it and be like, oh, that's really cool, or that's a really pretty place. I'd love to go there someday. And that is so much more effective than just trying to blast somebody with commercials. And no film office or tourism office has that amount of money to spend that would be equivalent to what, like you said, the eyeballs you get from just seeing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of my favorite sciences is neurocinematics. It was coined by a professor. I don't want to mispronounce his name, but he used to be at Harvard. Now he's at Princeton. And the studies are incredible. I use it in all my LSU lectures, but your brain is primed in storytelling to relax your body and receive and store information. When you're being sold something and it's not being told as a story, you're not going to receive it the same way. You're not going to trust it. Your dopamine levels are low. Your oxytocin's low. You're not taking it in. And then in a story where your brain chemically, I mean, our entire society is formed on stories. Like around a campfire, we were all cavemen. Hey, Bob ate that berry and died. There was no Bob, but now never to eat that berry. Things like that. We've used it to survive, and our bodies our brains are built for receiving information and story. And so, which speaks to the power of our industry as well. But to your point about seeing it on screen, when it's just being there and it's not being sold to you as part of a story, your brain's going to take it differently, and it's going to love it differently. And you're going to mirror the experience, neuromirror, and the experience with the main character and want to relive that.
That is very cool. It's science. It's science.
For homework for the audience, look up neurocinematics, neural coupling, and mirroring in storytelling, and you'll see what happens to your brain when you're giving and receiving stories.
All right, Austin, make a note of that, and let's put some links in the show notes so that people can look up those three things. Well, very cool.
Yeah.
So moving on from kind of all of that, there are other things that Katie does. You have taken on the task of being the head of a new school in Baton Rouge that I think is a very cool concept. Is it a charter school? Is that what it technically is?
It will be a charter school. We're in the application process I have like a 4-hour presentation next month to the education board. And then hopefully we'll get our charter. We'll present for our charter in August and hopefully get it in October.
So, and this is a charter school. Explain what this charter school is and what it's going to be, because I think it's very cool.
Thank you. I think it's really cool too. Although I didn't read all the fine print on how much work there was to start a school where I got started. So note to self, don't do that again. So our school is going to give different pathways for students. So when you graduate, you are TOPS eligible, which is scholarship eligible here, to go to college, a 4-year college, and you can do a traditional college. You'll have all the credits you need. You'll have a traditional high school degree. But the way the high school degree is issued to you and the curriculum building up to it is all trained in our industry. So you could literally leave and start in our industry immediately. And our industry is film industry roughly is about 67% higher salary paid jobs than all other starting jobs in the country. So they're high paid gigs. But you have to know, how to get into the union hours, how to be a grip and electric, and it's not just producing and directing. So we're talking about all of the learning greens, learning catering, learning everything else that goes into film and television. And there will be 4 different pathways. They can go the business route and learn film accounting, which is a big deficit in our industry right now. They can do hair and makeup. They can do, grip and electric and editing. So there are different things that they can go do, and they will all be accredited and certified in these tasks. So you'll graduate Adobe certified. We're working with major industry partners to have set time and hopefully union hours for our seniors and things like that. So think about it this way. In history class, you're told to write a paper on Napoleon. But in our history class, you have to make a documentary, and you have to work with all the different film departments to make your documentary about Napoleon, which I think is great because if you make a documentary, you're going to remember that much more than any paper you ever. And there's so many collaborative efforts to go in and do that. Someone's doing costumes and the research that comes into that. Someone's doing the hair and makeup, and then someone's doing lighting, and then you've got your editing bay and all that. So basically we're graduating 4-year high school diploma, ready to go to college, but also completely ready to go into the industry. And the way this all started is we're modeling it after Roy Ball in LA, which was a school that George Clooney and Brian Lord started. When the way George Clooney tells the story is he was sitting around set one day and goes, "Why is everyone a white dude?" And realized that diversity is an issue that starts at the beginning of the pipeline, not the end. And so he said, "Well, how do we fix it?" And they're like, "Well, education," which I think is a very great way to fix a lot of things. And so they started a school, Roy Ball Academy in Los Angeles, and they haven't been around but for a few years. So all the metrics aren't there yet, but I've toured the school a couple of times. I think what they're doing is incredible. And we're not reinventing the wheel in Baton Rouge so much as we're taking pieces from all these different schools we know that have worked, special training curriculum schools, traditional high schools, everything else, and building it all together so that these kids have 4 years of a set experience.
Yeah, it's really cool because it's not just, kid goes off to film school at pick your college around the country, and I learned to be a screenwriter, a director, a producer, a cinematographer. Those are like that's the 4. Everybody wants to be one of those, and nobody ever really thinks about production design and all the other, things that go into, making whatever it is. And so to actually train people from the high school level, that if they do decide to go to film school at that point, they're going to be so far ahead of anybody else at that point, or if they just want to get a job and just start working in the industry, especially in Louisiana, once we survive until 2025, right? That whole saying that's been going around. Once production kicks back in, to start out and get jobs as PAs and grow in the industry like that will be, I think it's going to be a great opportunity. I just think it's one of those things that, you've got the school in LA, you'll have yours in Baton Rouge. Those will really be like the only 2 in the country, right? And there's nothing else really like that.
There are more popping up that I can't. There are more popping up.
Right, you're not allowed to say at this point.
I think you will see this trend in other key markets in the near future.
Yeah, good. Well, it's one of those things that hey, I wish as a kid growing up, I had something like that. I took a filmmaking class in high school, and that, changed my life kind of thing, blew my mind. I was like, Super 8, and I shot on Super 8 film and learned it, and it was amazing. And if you actually had a full track that you could do to learn the industry, I mean, granted, kids are kids, right? They'll say they want to do something, and then a few years later they're doing something else. But you'll have enough that come through something like that it can make a difference.
You're treating the film industry like it's core curriculum. You're learning all of it. And if you do want to be a producer or director or cinematographer, it's so much easier if you understand what everybody's job is on set. everybody's doing. And I think a lot of people think that they want to get into filmmaking for filmmaking and that's all it is. And that a big problem is people don't recognize the industry for all of the jobs that it is across. It's billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of people that are trained in a number of different things. Some people are setting up the lighting and not just doing this, the cinematographer bit. Some people are loading and unloading from trucks. Some people are changing the work. They're just a set can have anywhere from like a large scale set can have 200 plus people on it. Everyone's doing something, and a lot of people don't realize those jobs. And a lot of people think they graduate at a college level film program and they think the art department's 2 people, and then you go to a set and art department's like 50 deep, and you're like, oh my god. And one of the first guests I have in my college class, and the level I teach is all junior seniors. And so one of the first people have come in is one of the union reps, IATSE reps, and she literally does a PowerPoint showing the workflow of set and and it's like the first time they've ever seen it. And like, oh my God, this is so cool. And they don't know that there are jobs that exist that, one of my kids was like, oh my God, I can blow stuff up. Like, yeah, to blow stuff up.
Yeah. There's a little more training that's involved. There's some.
Don't start today.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there. So I think, I just think it's exciting. I'm thrilled. I'm really honored. I joke about how much work it is, but I'm really honored to be a part of it. And I think it's a real economic shift. We're going after specifically zip codes across the state it's a state school that have been underserved, and giving them an opportunity to either go straight into college or have a job that pays higher than what they would normally be able to get with a high school degree.
That's cool. How does it work at a state level then? Because obviously if the school is in Baton Rouge, or is this going to be multiple campuses?
Well, we'll start as one campus. The hope is to grow eventually, but we'll be a campus in Baton Rouge, but there are different types of charter schools. And the first level is a city school and the second is a state school. And we're a state school. So we'll be open. Enrollment will be open to anyone across the state.
Gotcha.
And a lot of that too because we're in Baton Rouge, it's just a lot of our students will come from Baton Rouge and the surrounding 9 parishes, which wouldn't be open if it were just a Baton Rouge school.
Right. That makes sense.
Be a larger circle, but I don't think the first year will be a state circle. And then as we grow, when we work out transportation plans, which is a huge issue in education,
sure, yeah,
getting kids to school, is getting
getting them there. That's the thing, right? That's are you guys going to even get involved in like busing, or it's got to be different than that? Really? Oh wow,
yeah.
That's crazy. All right, that's a logistical thing that just like.
No. But think about it. I will turn it into curriculum because transpo is a big part of film.
Yeah, the transportation department.
Yeah. And so like lunchroom is there'll be a catering section, learning catering and all the rules and whatnot and how to plan for large scale. So we want to tie in every element of the school into that. Now the school won't start till 2026. So we're still in planning. We're in year -1 right now. So we're still in planning mode for everything. So hopefully enough time to work out all that. But
yeah. Well, and so you're going to launch when 2026, you said?
August 2026.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got a little time, but I imagine
it comes fast.
Yeah. I was going to say it'll all the way up until the day you open, there'll still be work to do. Are you building a building from scratch, taking over an old existing school? Like, how's that going to work?
So right now our dream is to be on Celtic's lot.
Okay.
So the kids whenever production is happening in Baton Rouge, the kids are there, they see it, it's real, they understand what's going on, and be able to tie in some efforts. Because especially large studios, always want to get involved in stuff like this. So, we had Disney on lot and said, hey, we have these students, set visits, things like that. So the idea is to have it repurpose one of Celtic's buildings right now to start, and then hopefully with growth, be able to build our own.
And what do you envision for like enrollment for like a first year? Will you will it be kind of scattered? You'll open the doors with not just a freshman class, but freshman through senior. So you're going to open with just a freshman as the first thing, and then it'll year by year grow each class until you get to full.
Yeah, it'll be 90 to 100 students, or I should say 75 to 100 students. Year 1, and then every year we'll add 90 to 100 the year after.
That's a lot of kids for year 1. Do you think you're going to hit that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got so many college students who are like, oh my God, I would go back to high school for this. And we have a lot of, a lot of high schools and elementary schools even have like film programs, like a
Hmm.
class. And the kids that are thriving in there, if we say, hey, here's a specialty school,
Hmm.
I don't think it's going to be, I mean, we're doing parent surveys now and interest gauging and everything. And the response from the community has been incredible.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, also you think about it now, everybody's a filmmaker because we all have, our phones.
Yeah.
So kids are making stuff anyway. So giving them that opportunity to do that, I think I'm not worried about attracting enough students. I'm actually sad that we're not going to be able to accommodate everybody who
That's
applies.
interesting. And so forgive my lack of knowledge on charter schools and school systems and how they work. But for a charter school, if you're set up as a state school, but you are in the city of Baton Rouge, anybody that it's a public school then that you have to apply to be able to go though, but it's not like a private school where you have to pay tuition.
Correct. Yeah, we will self-sustain. We will be eligible for state funding and not at the level that public schools are, but we'll be eligible for state funding, grant funding, and then we'll do a lot of philanthropic raising on our own.
Hmm.
And the kids, so it doesn't cost the kids and the kids, there will be an application process just because we can't just open the doors and have
Yeah.
a ton, a flood. We have to start small and then we'll go from there. But yeah.
Yeah, but if you once you get to the point of you're 4 years in and you've got a full freshman through senior class, you can have 400 kids at a school, that's a decent sized school. That's
a lot bigger than where I went. Yeah,
that's pretty good. How then? And maybe I'm getting in the weeds, and you guys have not even gone to this. How then would let's say extracurricular stuff work? Because so much of a high school kid's life can be extracurricular stuff. Now it's almost like the extracurricular is already baked into the actual curriculum. But what if a kid wants to play sports? Do they have to then go to a different school to play sports? Because obviously you're not going to start up a whole sports program at this school, because then that's a whole other layer of money and time and everything else that goes on top of that.
Yeah, the sports, if we do sports teams and things like that, that wouldn't be till way down the road.
Yeah.
But no, not on rollout. Like you said, the extracurricular is built in. I mean, it's a specialty school.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the difference is, let's say you went to a trade school to learn HVAC. You're doing HVAC the whole time. You're not doing any core curriculum. So with us, you're going to learn film and television and get all your core.
Right.
So you're doing it all and to open up every possibility you would want in the future. So whatever it is that you want to do, because college is not for everyone.
Yeah.
And the film industry is not for everyone. And I'm sure we'll have kids that figure that out, that they don't
Yeah, you'll have
that.
kids come and go. Some kid will do it for 2 years and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go to regular high school. And because I imagine you'll have partnerships with other schools, because again, there's the homecoming dance stuff and then the proms and the sports stuff. Those are such a part of, kind of high school life.
Yeah, but I think also it's what we're creating too. Film people are so different, and we create these communities because you work together, 16 hours
Mm-hmm.
a day, and then you're in prep and wrap and everything. So and you're creating something. And I think when there is this massive group project, and you're all creating something, and there's this innate third space that works in this creative community, I think it builds something that's really unique and special just to this. So yeah, you might not have a basketball team, but you have a production team that you work with 24/7.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a big challenge. Like I said, I'm not a parent and I don't have kids, and these are just random questions that are popping off the top of my head. So I can only imagine the volume of questions that parents would have to send their kids to a school, because everyone will relate it to their own high school experience. Okay, well, this is what I did in high school. What is my kid going to do when they go to school? What will they do? What do they want to do? How will this benefit them? And so many things that go into it. That's a big job you've bitten off there.
Oh no, it's a lot, but also a lot of it is educating the parents on the opportunities, because the majority of the parents that we'll be dealing with don't come from a film background,
Right?
So it's educating them on the economics and the opportunities that exist. Because if you don't work in the film industry and you've never seen a set and you don't know how all that goes, you think to yourself, okay, director, producer, cinematographer, that's all their writer, and that's all there is. And even so, the parents are that too. So the parents don't see it as a viable. Some of the parents will not see it as a viable career path.
Sure.
And so a lot of it will be educating them on the numbers of that. These are the jobs we're talking about. This is where in the world they can work. This is what they can do. And 90% of what you do on set is a transferable skill set. If you wanted to work as an electrician on set And then you decided you didn't want to be on set and wanted to go work on an electrician somewhere else. It's an easily transferable skill set.
Yeah, and I don't think the real success will be able to be seen until 10 years down the road, right? You know, after people have gone through the program, graduated, gotten jobs, been in their careers for a little bit, you know, that's when it'll start to gain notoriety and people will say, oh, okay, now I can really see what this is and what's happening. So
yeah, and it's just keeping the inspiration, the faith to that point. Like I believe in that point, so I will work to get us there. And I think just getting everybody to that point. But that's the thing about starting something new. It takes a while before it pays off. It's like people who go to the gym once and they're like, don't have the good. Like, well, do that every day for 20 years and let's see how you do.
I'm not ripped. That didn't work.
Yeah. I used to teach Pilates and I had this one client and she would skip like months and months and months and months. And she would always come 3 weeks before a vacation. Always. And she'd work out every day 3 weeks before a vacation. And she's like, I want a flat stomach. I'm like, well, okay.
Well, that's a whole other conversation there on diet and exercise and lifestyle and everything else. That'll be my other alternate podcast. We'll do an entire lifestyle and exercise podcast.
Yeah. All right. I'll sign up for that one too.
All right, good. Well, before we wrap up here, Katie Pryor, the woman with three names.
I know. I like the way you say it. I do sound like a little bit like a serial killer, though.
Yeah. Well, before we go, tell us about the three names. Why three names?
Short story is Katie's boring. I prefer the name Patton, but 50% of the people in my life call me Katie and 50% call me Patton. So it's easier to keep Katie Patton Pryor. So everybody knows who they're talking about. All
right. Well, anything you want to wrap us up on before we go?
Oh my God. No,
that's all right. Let
me explain how a four-way stop works. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I guess before we wrap up, I should say, one, this has been a ton of fun, doing these 50 some odd episodes of the podcast we've done to this point so far. So, what's that, Austin? 54th episode. So first off, thank you, Katie, for being on the show. Thank you, everybody who has is listening to this. We actually have an audience, believe it or not. I could be talking to the ether and like no one actually hears us, but we do have an audience. People are actually listening. So we're very appreciative that to all of you who have been listening to this. This is not the end. It's not going away forever, but I'm going to be gone for a little while here. We're going to take a hiatus for a month or two before the podcast may start back up with the potential new host or me coming back to help co-host. I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. But just thank you, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. So many great guests that we've had so far and hopefully many more. And you can, now I'm going to give myself a personal shout out. You can find me personally on Instagram, just my name at Tony Armour, Sunscreen Film Festival, Sunscreen FF St. Pete. And we're going to start up another, the Sunscreen podcast. If you want to continue to hear me ramble and talk to people like we do and just have these conversations and you like to listen to me and not just the Dallas thing, but everything in general. Anyways, that's a long winding way of saying thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And for the last, I don't know how many episodes I'm saying I need like a wrap up tagline, Katie, and I don't have one. What's the wrap up tagline for my last episode? What is that? What should I say?
All I can think is catch you on the flip side.
Yeah. Well, anyways, go to the website, Dallas Film Commission, DallasCreatesActually.org is the website. Follow all the Dallas Film Commission stuff on all the Dallas socials as well. You can just Google, Dallas Film Commission. So keep up with the Dallas Film Commission, what they're doing, the newsletter, and then find me out there as well. Thanks, everybody.